Every town has its whispers, but few are carried on four legs. If you lived in Juniper Hollow, you knew to expect certain things with the turning of each season. That first frost on the pumpkins right before Halloween. The scent of fresh-cut grass rippling through in spring. The only traffic light in town blinking yellow even on Tuesdays. And then there was the dog, the stray. Old and shaggy, with a coat matted by time and weather, he wandered not like a beggar, not like one lost, but with purpose in his bones. Each day, just as the sun began to fold itself behind the scrim of oak trees along County Route 7, he would appear near the grain silo and begin his loop. No one knew when he started. He was simply noticed. The kids on Mulberry Street called him Mr. Barkless. The elderly woman who ran the bakery swore he was the ghost of a childhood pup. But most just called him Ghost. He did not bark, he did not run. He never crossed into a yard uninvited. His pace was even, rhythmic, as though he followed a memory rather than a map. His path was always the same, down Mulberry, across Dealey Lane, past the old church with the paint flaking from its steeple, looping past 5 homes before disappearing again at the outskirts near the Orchard Hill. 7 blocks, 23 minutes. Fewer and fewer people tried to approach him over time. He simply didn't allow for closeness. A girl once left a plate of roast chicken out for him. Carefully deboned by her mother's hands, he came, paused 3 feet from it, sniffed the air, and walked on. Someone else held out a leash. He paused, studied her, then turned away. Not in fear, in sadness perhaps, or knowing. It wasn't a mystery anyone ever hurried to solve. Because there was something unspoken about Ghost's presence. Something delicate you didn't want to break. Like watching the breeze ripple a pool of water, creating patterns too meaningless and beautiful to interpret. People began to wait for him. A man running late for his shift at the hardware store would still delay 4 minutes to let Ghost pass unbothered by traffic. Children waved to him from porches as if he were Sunday's mailman, a ritual, part of the town's DNA. No one claimed him. No one remembered when he first arrived, and yet he missed nothing, no evening. Not until later would they understand why he walked at all. Because this isn't a story about who fed him best or who finally caught him. It isn't about where he came from or where he belonged. It's about what he came to do. And who he left behind, quietly changed, without knowing it had happened. His route curved in silence, and the silence stayed long after his paws kept moving. Madeline Harris had learned how to speak to silence. It had become her closest companion in the years since her husband's voice had left the corners of their home. The silence folded itself into the fabric of the old farmhouse on Orchard Bend like a well-worn quilt, content to rest across her table, her walls, her days. Each evening, she made tea in the same kettle she'd used for 43 years, the bottom oxidized and slow to boil. She sat on the porch beneath a sky that pinkened like an old bruise and spoke into the wind as if it still listened, as if Harold might still answer from the other rocking chair, puffing his pipe and nodding to her words like they were rain falling right on time. Most evenings, she'd talk about her garden, about the peonies refusing to bloom again or the dandelions that insisted on claiming the gravel path. Some days she recounted a dream she'd had. Other times, she scolded the wind for taking her letters off the windowsill. But one night, something changed. Her words caught in her throat as she noticed movement at the edge of her gate. He was there, the dog, not 2 yards away, still as a shadow, ragged, mud-colored, and haloed by the falling dusk. She didn't move. Neither did he. His eyes were the color of worn cedar, gentle in their stillness. He stared in that unblinking way that animals do when they are not measuring distance with suspicion or sizing up danger, but simply seeing. Then he walked on. The next night, she saw him again. Same place, same time. At first, she thought it coincidence. Strays passed now and then. Farm dogs cut loose. Lost hounds trailing scents from hunting cabins. But this was different. His pause was purposeful. Days turned into weeks. and still he came. Every evening, a little past 6:40, just after the low sun sent a cascade of amber stripes through her window panes, he appeared. She learned not to move, not to call out, not to offer food or reach too quickly. He didn't want touch. He wasn't asking. He was remembering, and she didn't quite know what she was doing. Only that she waited for him now. Like the tea. Like the sun downshifted out of the sky. Like the porch steps creaking under her own bones each night. One day, after he passed and disappeared down the road as usual, Madeline whispered, barely audible, even to herself, "Who are you walking for?" The wind didn't answer, but deep in her chest, something stirred, something unused for too long, like a violin string pulled gently after years of silence. A resonance. Not pain, exactly. She'd grown old with pain. No, this was different. It was memory. In the front hall, next to the grandfather clock that still ticked, despite its pendulum sticking every third hour, sat a brass-framed photograph. A faded golden retriever, mouth open with joy, chasing bubbles. His coat was the same hue as the caramel drops Harold used to keep in a glass jar. Oliver. That had been the dog. He came to them as a pup in their 40s and stayed through their retirements, through the waning plates of cholesterol-free meals, through anniversaries where cake was replaced with nagging about sugar counts. Oliver had slept beneath Harold's reading chair until his hind legs gave out. Then he slept beside Madeline's bed, where she whispered to him each night, "It's okay to go." It had been 10 years. She'd never gotten another. Not from lack of love, but because the kind of love that lives with silence, it doesn't seek to be loud again. The heart doesn't grow back the same once it's broken, she often said aloud, as much as to the wind as to herself. But the presence of this stray, ghost, as she now quietly called him in her mind, unlocked something she hadn't expected. It wasn't that he resembled Oliver, because he didn't. Not in build, not in movement. In fact, every part of Ghost was the opposite of her dog, wiry where Oliver was soft, reserved where Oliver was jubilant. But there was something in his gaze, in the way he acknowledged the world without asking from it, without demanding. A quiet tether formed between them. She noticed when his gait had a hitch from time to time, maybe his hips, the way old bones whisper shame into joints. And he noticed, she thought, when her teacup rattled in her hand more than usual, or her voice barely lifted over the clap of crickets. Some evenings, she laid a hand on the wooden rail beside her and said, "Still walking, are we?" And though he never responded, not even a look, she believed he heard her. The neighbors asked eventually, "You see that old mutt by your place? He pass by regular?" Madeline only nodded. She kept his visits to herself, not out of greed or secrecy, but because some things are made of gentleness. And gentleness bruises too easily when people push in with curiosity. Instead, she began to prepare for him. She'd sweep the gate path clear of fallen leaves. She tied back the jasmine vines so they wouldn't startle him. Some nights she even found herself choosing her scarf more carefully before stepping outside, as though appearance somehow mattered to this four-legged ghost who never came near. And one night, just as cicadas crescendoed into their usual lament and the porch light flickered twice before settling into amber glow, Madeline did something she hadn't done in years. She whispered, "Come closer if you like." Ghost paused. He lingered at the gate a moment longer than usual. Then, without a sound, he turned and continued on his way. She smiled, not because he came, but because she realized she didn't need him to. She simply needed someone to listen. And though he never spoke, never barked, never crossed into her yard, it felt somehow like he had heard every word, like distant thunder acknowledging the sky. It's strange the way a dog can become part of a town's rhythm, like a street lamp flicking on at dusk, or the train horn echoing faintly on quiet nights. Ghost had slipped into that rhythm, steady as breath, always walking, always returning. But as his presence grew more consistent, so too did a quiet curiosity among those who watched him. He didn't veer, never strayed from the pattern. 7 blocks, 23 minutes, 5 houses where he paused, always in the same order, always at the same time, almost down to the minute. The townsfolk began to speculate, not loudly and not with urgency, but with a kind of reverence, like trying to read the constellations, unsure whether they were meant for direction or just beauty. Cody Jasper was the first to take notes. 16, with a mop of hair that never obeyed gravity and a summer job sweeping aisles at the hardware store, Cody had grown up with Ghost as part of the backdrop. He'd seen him hundreds of times. Everyone had. But it wasn't until his grandmother began pointing at the dog from her window that he started paying real attention. "Shadow," she said one evening, her voice clear and bright for the first time since the leaves had turned. "There's my shadow boy." He nearly dropped his phone. His grandmother hadn't used full sentences in months, not without drifting into silence or fragments. But when she said the name, it was like someone had reached in and found the light switch. Cody asked, "You know that dog?" She blinked, then smiled in a way that split her wrinkles into soft gullies. "Of course, he used to wait under the lilac tree for your granddad to come home." There had never been a lilac tree, or a granddad Cody had known, but a name, a spark, a moment of clarity. It was enough to start something, so he borrowed the family drone, the one he'd gotten for Christmas and rarely used after losing it to a tree, twice. That night, after Ghost made his usual appearance, Cody sent the small machine into the air and followed from a careful distance. Through the screen, he watched the path stretch before the dog, like a well-worn groove carved not just in streets, but in time. When he got home, he traced the footage onto a map. He marked the pause points, 5 houses, all different, no obvious connections, except that Ghost lingered longer in front of each one, as though they called to him. He didn't tell his friends, he didn't post about it, but over the next week and the next, he followed Ghost again, and every time the route was the same, clean, measured, and quiet. Curiosity began to seep into corners of town life. The baker who always left the front light on said the dog started glancing through her shop window every Thursday. A mailman swore Ghost moved just enough to avoid his cart, but never changed his path. One morning, Janice Franklin, the retired school teacher who now ran Juniper Hollow's only cozy cafe, pulled out a dusty photo album from behind the counter. She'd been reorganizing old, cluttered shelves when the corner of a picture peeked out from behind a falling recipe card. It was soft, with age, sepia at the edges, a moment captured just outside her cafe door. Janice herself, visibly younger, laughing with 2 patrons mid-latte. And there, just beside them, a stray dog, Ghost, same coat, same gait, same expression. Her hand trembled slightly as she showed it to the barista. "This can't be right. This photo's from, must be 9 years ago." She brought it to church the next day, showed it to others, and some nodded. Yup, does look like him, but no one could recall details. No one remembered a name, an owner, or even a story. That's when the online posts began. It began with Cody uploading the drone path, anonymously, careful to crop street signs. He called it Ghost Watch. Users, mostly from Juniper Hollow, began posting their own sightings. Still photos, blurry shots from phones, small water bowls left at driveways. Most comments said the same thing. He never touched the food, didn't flinch at shouts, didn't return stares. But always, he walked. One commenter wrote, "He passed my house last night, never noticed before, but I swear he looked right at my dad's chair on the porch. My dad's been gone 4 years." Another posted a video, Ghost pausing in front of a curtain-drawn window. The caption read, "That's where my sister used to sit when she was sick." Nobody accused anyone of imagining things. The speculation was quiet, the kind of gentle wondering one does when the sky turns pink at odd times or music creeps into dreams, a kind of respectful awe. The local veterinarian, Dr. Salgado, offered a theory during a town meeting pressed between alder updates and the annual chili contest rules. Some dogs imprint on people, places, she said, eyeing the townsfolk who filled every pew of the old community hall. Maybe he's connecting grief like threads, smelling it, feeling it. Her words weren't dismissed. They weren't proven either. But that didn't stop the town from continuing to watch. So now, every evening, as the barns picked up the orange halo at the edge of sunset, Ghost began to draw more quiet eyes. Not in pursuit, not to capture, but to witness. No one tried to touch him anymore. No one offered food. Some left chalk hearts on the sidewalk near his pause points. Others strung wind chimes on porches, believing, somehow, that the music might mean something to him. At night, Cody sometimes sat up, staring at his computer map. 5 homes, 5 pause points. And something deeper than routine tugging at the air whenever Ghost appeared, like a memory walking loops through the skeleton of the town. And always at the end, the same fading point, the Orchard Road. The hill where no home stood anymore, just fields, fence posts, and silence stretching out toward the woods. Cody thought about asking his grandma again, but she had returned to her curtain staring, her sentences slipping into clouds. He wanted to ask what Ghost meant, whose shadow had been, what lilac tree she spoke of. But deep down, he knew the story wasn't in what answers she might or might not give. It was in the walking itself, the silent returning, the remembered path that tied people together without ever making a sound. The stories didn't come all at once, but like morning dew gathering drop by drop, quiet, unnoticed, until suddenly everything is wet with something you hadn't seen coming. Across town, the old man at the corner of Pelham and South had stopped tossing breadcrumbs into the gutter and started slicing one thick piece of rye each morning, for the dog who never came in close, but always slowed enough to glance toward the porch swing. He didn't say much to his neighbors anymore, not since his wife passed, but one day when Ghost paused longer than usual, the man stepped outside, 2 feet beyond the top stair, clutching the sandwich to his chest as though it were some sacred offering. Ghost didn't approach, but he stood there, and the man whispered, "Thank you for showing up," then went back inside. No more was said. No one in town knew these things aloud, but somehow, word found its own way through the latticework of town gossip and gentle attention, like seeds on the wind. Everyone knew someone who'd had a visit. On Lavender Hill, a woman barely 30 found herself stepping outside when she heard the dog pass. Just once, then again. She had been struggling, sleepless for months, her newborn finally lulled to quiet by the ceiling fan's steady rotation. She didn't even notice she was crying, until she saw Ghost sniff at the edge of the baby quilt that had slipped off the porch railing. She wrapped her arms around herself, not in cold, but in realization. That night she smiled, a real one. She didn't talk much at the next mom's group meeting, but when someone asked how the baby was sleeping, she just replied, "Better, now that we're not alone." People stopped trying to explain him, and instead started remembering themselves in his presence. Chalk appeared along the dog's route. Simple drawings, the kind children know how to make best. Smiling suns, hearts, rainbows with the names of people who'd gone, and people still missed. One message read in blocky, staggered letters, "Thank you for walking Dad home." Another, "We see you." Each word low to the ground, as though written for eyes closer to the earth. Ghost never veered, but he walked through them. For a moment, ghost white paws softened the chalk outlines, like memory gently smudging time. At Marlowe and 3rd, Cody's grandmother waited on the front step some evenings, more alert than usual. She called him Shadow each time, her voice firm with history that didn't align with the present. Sometimes she held a biscuit in her hand. Most times, she just sang softly. Hymns from some old Baptist book Cody had only heard when sorting boxes in the attic. It unnerved him at first, how clear she became when Ghost passed. Like his presence thinned the fog in her mind just long enough for truth to speak. One night, He asked her, as gently as he could, "Did he really used to be your dog?" She turned toward him, eyes shining but distant again. "Maybe not. But I think I loved who he used to walk with." Cody didn't ask again. Mrs. Green, who lived just a block from the church, started leaving folded notes under a smooth stone near her gate. She never said what they were. When asked, she'd shrug and say, "Just things I forgot to tell my daughter." No one moved the notes. The breeze lifted a few. Rain blurred the ink on others. But the pile always renewed itself. Tiny paper memorials that didn't ask for answers, only passage. Ghost began to slow more often at Madeline Harris's place. Not long, not near, but long enough. And though she still never moved toward him, she began speaking again. Aloud, not just to the night breeze, but to him. "You don't have to keep walking if you're tired," she said once, her voice barely loud enough for the jasmine to catch. The next evening, he stopped at the gate, not just paused, but still, his eyes reflecting the porch light like twin pewter tokens. He didn't approach. He didn't stay. But for the first time, when he left, she noticed a limp, subtle but real, a catch in rhythm, weariness beneath duty. So the next morning, though her joints argued with her the whole way, she shuffled down to the oak tree by her fence and moved the bricks aside to make a clean patch of grass. Not to coax him in, not to trap him, but as a kindness, as a place between steps. Other homes joined the soft ritual. Mrs. Green tied a blue scarf to her mailbox, a gesture she recalled her daughter once using to find their house as a child. The scarf vanished after 2 days. She smiled. The young mother left a folding chair near the porch for the first time, blanketed in a knitted throw. "In case," she said, when her husband gave her that sideways look. The old man moved his porch light closer to the steps so the bread wouldn't get soggy on the railing. Each person, in quiet synchronicity, made room for a creature who asked for nothing and gave solace in return. The town, in turn, changed. Not with fanfare, not with festivals, but quietly, like ice slowly giving way to thaw, revealing earth that was always underneath. And slowly, so slowly that no one dared admit it outright, people began to speak more. Waves from porches lasted longer. Sidewalk conversations stretched past dusk. Some even walked a portion of Ghost's loop themselves, not in mockery, but to feel what he might feel, to see what he might see. And always at the end of that loop, the same road, the same silent orchard, the same vanishing point. But now, people waited. Not crowded, not intrusive, just present. Because maybe, just maybe, presence was the point. To walk a town awake again, not with barking or bravado, but with the hush of paw steps, softening grief into memory, and memory into love. It began with wind, not the kind that knocks over branches or howls through chimneys, but the kind that swirls like a whisper around your ankles before deciding to stay. For 2 days, the wind was restless, bending tree limbs low and stirring the brittle edges of weather-worn shutters. By nightfall on the 3rd day, the wind had teeth. Clouds gathered thick and low over Juniper Hollow, pressing down like a hand, smoothing the sky. The town braced quietly, as small towns do, sandbags at the community hall, flashlights tested in junk drawers, candles lined up like sentries on windowsills. And yet, even as the wind rose and the clouds grew mouth-dark, people still looked out their windows around sunset, hoping to catch sight of that shaggy outline following his path. But Ghost didn't come, not that night, and not the next. By the 3rd evening, unease began to stretch long and yawning behind ribs. Madeline kept her tea warmer than usual, her eyes tracing the same rhythm through the dusk. 7 blocks, 23 minutes, 5 hearts now attuned to his passing. Nothing. The road looked lonelier without him. The streets a little longer. Somewhere between anxiety and reverence, people began to step out of their homes, not to chase or search in desperation, but to make themselves visible, hoping perhaps that if Ghost was lost in the dark, the glow of open doors might call him home. The Finding Ghost page formed overnight. It wasn't official. It didn't have sponsors. But somehow, in the way these town threads pull together during moments that feel bigger than themselves, nearly half of Juniper Hollow joined by sunrise. There were no urgent posts, just gentle questions. Has anyone seen him? Still no paw prints on our block. A teenager posted a photo of her sidewalk message, blurred to a blue smear by rain. Below it, a comment. Don't worry, chalk washes, but love stays. Cody stayed silent at first. He'd already watched the drone footage from last week more times than he could count, tracing Ghost's route with the edge of his thumbnail on his screen. His grandmother had gone quiet again. Her shadow reverted back to a whisper, and then nothing. But the silence felt sharper now, like something missing had taken all the air with it. So Cody joined the search, not because he thought it would work, but because doing nothing felt like disrespect. He put on his rain-stiff jacket, pulled the drone out again, and followed the path. The streets shimmered with water, puddles catching porch lights in puddles, like memories reflected back. He walked the whole loop, every house, every pause point, empty. No sign of moving fur or cedar-colored eyes. And at Madeline's house, the porch light was on, warm, waiting. When the first lightning strike hit halfway across the hills, Madeline tightened her shawl and placed a flashlight into the window frame like a lighthouse. She never went back inside that night. She simply sat watching the corner of her gate, whispering, not to coax, but to remain present. The next morning came without fanfare. Just pale sun behind straggling clouds and the sound of branches being cleared 2 blocks over. Madeline woke stiff on the porch bench, joints aching, heart heavier than her bones could carry. She made her tea, sweetened it, placed a second cup near the edge of the steps, though she knew it was foolish. That's when she heard it. A sound quiet and broken. A whimper, not sharp but long and wet with exhaustion. She turned. He stood just beyond her hydrangeas, soaped through, one paw lifted slightly, favoring a limp. His coat hung like thin blankets, heavy with stormwater. His eyes were cloudy, not dim, but distance-tinged, like seeing through smoke or time. He didn't try to come closer. He stood there, head lowered, shivering, but proud, like someone too tired to ask, but wishing to be allowed. Madeline didn't speak. She simply rose, slowly, and opened the door wide. A crack, then wider. He took 3 steps, hesitant but aimed. Then inside. The silence as he crossed the threshold wasn't empty. It rang like bells you can't see. Inside, she laid down a towel, not sterile and new, but soft and old, frayed at the edges like something once loved deeply. Ghost collapsed onto it, as if he'd always been waiting for this. She placed a bowl of water beside him, untouched except for one soft lick. Then sat nearby, not beside, but within reach. She whispered, "Welcome home." And for the first time since Harold had passed, since Oliver had curled into a final sleep at the foot of her bed, since loneliness had taken up residence in her chest like a lodger that wouldn't leave, Madeline Harris let herself cry. By afternoon, word had spread, not by call or post, but by that same quiet current familiar to any small town. A whisper carried between aisles at the hardware store, passed over cafe counters, murmured as candles were lit again, this time not in mourning, but in vigil. Ghost had come in from the storm. There were no parade lines, no news vans, just faces waiting on sidewalks, hearts slightly lifted, breath held as if listening for something ancient and important. People brought offerings, dog biscuits wrapped in dishcloths, jars of salve, blankets softened by years of washing. Salgado was among the first to arrive. She examined Ghost gently, hands mapping the outlines of bones beneath fur like braille. No chip, no collar. 15, maybe older, she said. He's just tired, aching from the miles. Madeline nodded slowly. He's done the work. Her voice didn't waver. Now he can rest. And Ghost, nestled into her hallway, between antique umbrella stands and the smell of cloves that clung to her wainscoting, closed his eyes. As lightning faded into story and rain into fragile recollection, Juniper Hollow held its breath. There were no commands, no leashes, just warmth and knowing. The mornings came slow. Madeline found herself waking not to an alarm, nor to birdsong, but to the soft, steady breath that now filled the rhythm of the house. The kind of quiet wheeze that dogs make when they're too tired to snore. Ghost lay by the radiator, curled into the old towel she'd smoothed beneath him. Legs tucked, tail wrapped in like a comma, had been placed at the end of a long sentence. She didn't move at first, she simply watched. Tea cooling on the side table, slippers forgotten under the bed. There was a hush to everything. Not grief, yet, but something around its edges, the knowledge of something finite drawing near. Later that morning, Ghost raised his head. Only halfway, only enough to see her. Their eyes met, she said nothing. Neither did he. It was a language she had come to understand. She moved softly through the house, setting water near him, crushing a boiled potato with the back of a spoon when he ignored the kibble she'd picked up from the gas station. He sniffed, but didn't eat. Still, he wagged his tail. Once. That was enough. The vet returned that afternoon, warmth behind her eyes and a stethoscope that looked out of place against the coziness of the old wallpaper. Ghost lay still and allowed her hands to press gently across his ribs. Old, was all she said. No trauma, just winding down. Madeline nodded, like a clock with its last few ticks. It wasn't said with sadness, not yet, more like reverence. Like Ghost had become something holy by doing the simplest things, by walking, watching, waiting. That evening, someone brought a blanket, deep blue, thick and soft. No card, just folded and hung gently on the gate. The next day, a jar of peanut butter showed up. Then a bouquet of daisies, a child's drawing, a candle in a mason jar. No signatures, just evidence of care. They placed the items around him like offerings, not to fix, not to heal, but to say, "We see you." Ghost lay in the middle, the quiet hub of an unspoken ritual. When the wind passed through the kitchen window, the curtains whispered stories in a language only dogs and the very old could understand. Madeline stayed near. On the third night, she didn't go to bed. She brought the old blanket from the cedar chest and placed it by Ghost's side, laid down gently, felt the warmth of his slow breath tickling her wrist. She whispered into the stillness, "You did your job." He didn't move, but she felt deeply that he had heard her. When sunrise came, quiet, pale, almost shy, he was still. No breath now, no wheeze. His eyes closed the way they had been, tail curled in, body soft. Madeline did not cry right away. She placed a hand over his chest, light as moonlight, just to say goodbye without shaking the calm he had carried, even into death. Then, a moment later, she stood, poured 2 cups of tea, one by the front step, one in her own hand, and waited. Word spread again, as it always did, not by shouts or formal message, but through murmurs, reverent footsteps, and long-held glances. By dusk, people had gathered, not in the yard but along the route, on porches, on steps, at windows. Each house along the loop placed something small, a candle, a biscuit, a story spoken aloud to air and leaves and stars. One by one, they lit what they brought. And when the last light glowed at the edge of the orchard hill, the town looked less like a town and more like a constellation on the ground, pinned together by the memory of paw steps, bound not by grief but by gratitude. Ghost had walked them open, held space, then left as quietly as he came. And in that silence, they were not the same. Winter passed more gently than expected. In Juniper Hollow, the snows came soft and patient, dusting the porch railings with sugar-fine ice, painting the sidewalks in quiet frost. And through it all, Ghost's path remained. Not in paw prints, those had vanished with the first early thaw, but in memory, in muscle, in movements unconsciously repeated. On Thursdays near sundown, the old man by the corner still made a thick slice of rye bread and placed it on the step, not as bait, not in mourning. It was just something his hands remembered doing now. Across town, Children still chalked hearts near their porches. And sometimes, even though the boards of the old bridge creaked with cold, someone would pause halfway across and turn, just for a moment, half expecting to see dust-colored fur trotting up the slope. He never came, but still, people turned. They turned because some part of them remembered being seen. Cody Jasper turned too, but not on the bridge. Instead, in a quiet corner of the library where he'd begun filming interviews, soft-lit stories, gentle edits, fragile truths. He called his project Eyes Like Ghosts. It started with his grandma, a recording of her humming low and slow, a lilting song about home he'd never heard before. Then it grew, one voice, then another. People who'd once been silent or uncertain or forgotten now found themselves captured in frame. Cody didn't tell them what to say, he just let them speak. What surprised him most was how often the stray dog came up, unprompted, in all those quiet stories. He walked where the wind used to carry my husband's voice. He stood right where my son used to park his bike. He passed me once, and I knew I wasn't as invisible as I thought. That was the line Cody wrote on his own wall in marker just above his monitor. I knew I wasn't invisible. Down on Main Street, a statue was placed, not towering, not grand, just bronze, about shoulder height. A dog mid-step, tail low, eyes forward. At his feet, the path rippled outward in a spiral pattern, 5 curves like the pauses Ghost made. A little version of his map etched into stone. The plaque said, "For the one who remembered all of us when we forgot ourselves." No one could recall who decided the words. They had just come. Like most things in Juniper Hollow, strangers sometimes pass through town now, hearing about the dawn with the path, and they'd stop at the square, snap a photo, ask a few questions before going on their way. They always seemed quieter when they left. Across the street from the statue, Madeline Harris started spending her Sundays teaching simple gardening lessons in the lot behind the church. She'd called the rescue group first, saying she had a little time, maybe a little strength to offer. Whatever's still useful, she'd said. The group had gladly taken her in. Soon she had more than enough to do, sorting blankets, writing little introduction cards for the pets awaiting homes, teaching shy hands how to trust long ears and scared eyes. Her porch chair still sat at the ready, but now, sometimes, she shared the seat. The young mother with the baby would bring her infant on warm days and sit with Madeline a while. They talked of nothing large, just dirt, tea, and how some silences are rich instead of empty. Every so often, when the wind shifted right, the jasmine would stir and Madeline would lift her head. Just for a moment, she'd smile, small, knowing, then pour another cup for the second chair. Some nights, wind chimes danced along Mulberry and Dealey Lane. No particular rhythm, just shimmering sound where pause points used to be. People said the tone calmed them, like a memory humming someone had written on the Finding Ghost page, which wasn't used much anymore, but never deleted. And on those nights, if you walked the path, not chasing anything, not calling or hoping, but simply walking, you might feel it too. A hush that followed, a rhythming your steps you didn't remember learning, a presence, not quite behind you, not quite before, but alongside. And sometimes, for just one impossible breath, you might hear the faintest sound on the street behind you, like soft paw steps on cool concrete. No weight, just warmth. The kind of echo left behind not from sound, but from love.